Hi, my name's Danny Day. I run a company called QCF Design, and last time we spoke I was working on a game called Desktop Dungeons.
And what's happened with Desktop Dungeons since we last spoke?
I believe we last spoke when the game was in beta, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
So we were accepting pre-orders, and that was funding development, and that did really well. That allowed us to keep working on the game for probably a little bit too long because we didn't have financial stress.
Right.
We ended up releasing the game on Steam for Mac, Linux and PC on the 7th of November 2013. The game did really well on launch, and that was really good for us.
And what is really well? How many people have ordered the game?
At the moment we're sitting at about, across all the platforms we cover, we're sitting at about 170,000 players, people that have bought the game.
And do you know globally where those come from?
Yes, well we can track them on some of our platforms.
Right.
I haven't done all the tracking on the mobile because we launched mobile in 2015, so it took us a while to sort that out. And I haven't actually tracked everything across mobile, but I would say about 48% of our customers are from the US. I'm just about to try and push our numbers of Chinese purchases up by releasing a Chinese localized version. Just sort of finished the major translation on that, and that's where we're at the moment.
And you went into mobile with the game in 2015. How challenging was that?
Mobile was a big target for us. Every time we spoke to anyone about Desktop Dungeons, and initially everybody was saying, when is this coming to my phone? When is this coming to my phone? So from sort of 2011 onwards, everybody was saying, I really want this on my phone. Funny enough, it's not actually on people's phones yet because the final interface ended up being too large and too cumbersome for phones. So it's a tablet game only. It's done reasonably well as a tablet game, especially as a $10 premium purchase, which is one of the good things about it, is that we can say, well, here's the game for $15 on PC and $10 buys the game on your tablet. And we have a lot of people buying it on both because we have this whole system that shares your saved games across, and people can play it on multiple platforms and they sync. And that whole process, that it was a holdover from the beta, works really well for us. I mean, it's a great piece of software.
So will it not be on mobile?
Maybe one day we'll do it on people's phones. Some people on Android get it on their phones, a little bit of hacking, but at the moment it's actually a really frustrating thing to play on your phone. It's great on a tablet. We redesigned a whole bunch of things for tablet play that works really well. But on a phone, your finger play space is just a bit too small. So you have to be super accurate. And a lot of people think they can be that accurate, but when we tested it with them, they were sort of like, oh no, this is bad, I don't like it. And then when you give them a tablet version, they're just, oh, this is wonderful. So, and I mean, I think that took us about nearly 2 years to get done, because we had to sort of pave the way for Apple being able to pay South African companies, and we've been trying to get Google to pay South African companies for a long time, because that's sort of the story of everybody who wants to develop on Android in South Africa. We're working on that. We're still trying to make the Android payment cycle work. I think Nick Hall, the head of IESA, is currently working on someone. And that's been a very slow process. It's sort of like whenever I go overseas or whenever I go to a convention, there's someone from Google sort of just like, hello, buttonhole them. Hello, let's work this out. What's going on with this? And we had some good movement last year and at the beginning of this year, but we had to release the game in the meantime. So we ended up creating a partnership with a company in the US. So they distribute the game for us on Android, and then we get paid based off of that.
And you've got a second game, which is called Mathstermind.
Yes. So Mathstermind is actually a reboot of the first game that QCF produced. We produced that as part of a sort of test project to see if cell phones could teach maths using games. This is back in the days of feature phones, so we didn't have touchscreens, we didn't have smartphones, which meant that we had a huge issue with phone fragmentation and stuff like that. So it was kind of this thing where Nokia was one of the research partners on this, and they gave us 20 phones, and we built a game customized for those 20 phones. That went out to 20 schoolgirls in rural Mpumalanga, all grade 10 students, so between 15 and 16. And it worked really well. We were part of 2 games on the project, so it was partnering with Mindset Learn. They had sort of like a syllabus, and they had a bunch of mathematical content that was all in video that they would send out to people. And we worked on that.
So what's the reboot going to be?
Well, the reboot is the pedagogical approach that Mathstermind had, which worked really well. I mean, we had people playing the game for 10 hours a week, and that's a ludicrous amount of playtime outside of school, because the phones weren't allowed in school. So we had 10 hours a week of, non-school, non-homework, voluntary maths. Voluntary maths. What is that as a phrase even, right? So that worked really well because we focused on building a game that wasn't sort of this traditional edutainment approach.
Yeah.
And since then, we've tailored the approach we built, which we called guerrilla learning. We kind of tailored that for multiple edutainment projects that we approach as QCF later on.
Yeah.
Bigger client projects, stuff like that, things for the World Bank, etc.
Yeah.
And that worked because we didn't try and sort of spoonful of sugar approach. We were like, here's the fun stuff that we try and hook you with, and then you have to do like 5 maths equations, and it's boring.
Yeah.
And everybody ends up presenting the maths equations, which is obvious.
Yeah.
You know, and then why would they not just play a game that only offers the fun stuff? So we were like, well, what fun is there in math?
Yeah.
Well, the fun is in solving puzzles and figuring out things and using logic to deduce what's going on, which is what maths is all about. So maths can be fun. So we figured out how can we build a game around that sort of stuff. And we ended up building this game where you use mathematical knowledge and skill as, you know, in your own head to figure out these hidden puzzles and stuff like that. So that worked really well. So the reboot is going to be that, but in a modern touch screen interface with a lot more bells and whistles and neat graphics, and we can do all the transition animations that we wanted to do but couldn't do before because the phone didn't have enough memory, and also we don't have to worry about, you know, the thousands and thousands of phone handsets and the different versions of Java they use and all that stuff. So these days it's just like target a low version of Android, target an iOS, and you're okay. Yeah.
So what's next?
After that, it's mainly a process of sort of messing with different prototypes and seeing what sticks, because QCF will not invest in something without knowing that it has sort of a sharing ratio of at least 2.5 to 3 to 1. So that means that if we give a prototype to someone that looks terrible, as long as it is something that people want to share, if one person will share it to more than 2.5 people, then it will probably stay alive.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can reach a ratio that's that good with something that looks bad, or maybe doesn't have good sound or doesn't have good polish, etc., then we know that that's a thing that we can invest actual resources into and build a thing from there. We have millions and millions of game ideas. We're messing with virtuality right now. I'm currently trying to figure out how to do Kickstarters from South Africa. Again, you can't. So we're sort of trying to not necessarily pave the way, because there have been several South African studios that have figured out how to do that since. They all partner with UK or US businesses. We're in the process of starting a US subsidiary in order to handle Kickstarters, so that we have an avenue for Kickstarter funding. And I'm trying to Kickstarter a couple of board games. I think I've missed the window for one of them because it's sort of themed around the US election, and that's happening, next week?
Yes.
So
that one's gone by.
That's a bit of a thing, but that's the nice thing is that's reskinnable, so I'll reskin it to the South African election next year, and I'll see what that does. And maybe even British election at some point. And various other elections around the world, and if somebody is keen on a game that focuses on election and political machinations and sort of, what did I call it? It's called Steal This Election, and it is a card game that focuses on unsuspecting dice. That's sort of the angle that the game focuses on. Yeah.